My name is Ray, 27 years old, and until last month I was just another sports agent grinding my way up in a cutthroat industry. Growing up with nothing but my football talent, I fought for every opportunity while my sister Madison got everything handed to her. When I finally landed a $10 million contract for my client, I thought my parents would finally be proud. Instead, I ended up in a hospital bed with broken bones abandoned by the very people who should have protected me. What happened next changed everything. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, because this story of betrayal and justice is one you won't want to miss. I grew up in a modest neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family: hard-working father, devoted mother, and 2 kids with promising futures. But inside our home, the reality was starkly different. My parents, Robert and Linda, had always favored my sister Madison. 3 years younger than me, she was the princess of the household, while I was treated as an afterthought. As early as elementary school, the favoritism was clear. When I brought home straight, as my achievements were acknowledged with a quick nod. When Madison managed to get B's and C's, there were celebrations and ice cream trips. My parents justified this by saying she needed more encouragement than I did. Their reasoning: I was naturally gifted, so why praise what came easily? The pattern continued throughout my childhood. For my 10th birthday, I received a football, practical, and aligned with my interests, but nothing special. For Madison's 10th birthday 3 years later, my parents threw an extravagant party with a bounce house, hired entertainers and gifts that cost more than all my birthdays combined. When I pointed out the disparity, my father pulled me aside and scolded me for being jealous of my little sister. My athletic abilities became apparent in middle school. I excelled in football, basketball, and track. The football coach called me a natural talent, someone with real potential for a college scholarship. My mother attended one game that entire season, leaving early to pick up Madison from her friend's house. My father made it to 2 games, spending most of his time on phone calls. In high school, I became the star quarterback. Scouts from top colleges started showing interest in my junior year. The night of the state championship game, which we won with me throwing the winning touchdown, my parents didn't show up because Madison had a minor role in the school play. They didn't even call to ask about the result. Despite the lack of support, I secured a full football scholarship to Northwestern University. The day I received the acceptance letter, I rushed home bursting with excitement. My parents were in the living room helping Madison with a simple science project. When I announced my scholarship, my mother said, "That's nice, honey," before immediately returning her attention to Madison's volcano. My father added, "Just don't let it go to your head." Plenty of athletes think they're special until they meet real competition. College was my escape. Finally away from home, I thrived both on the field and academically, majoring in business with a focus on sports management. I maintained a 3.8 GPA while becoming a starting wide receiver by sophomore year. My parents attended exactly 2 games during my entire college career, both times because they coincided with campus tours for Madison, who was still in high school. During my senior year, disaster struck. A brutal tackle during a crucial game resulted in a knee injury that ended my playing career. The orthopedic surgeon delivered the news that no athlete wants to hear: I would never play professionally. While I was devastated, my parents seemed almost satisfied. My father's words: "Maybe now you'll focus on something more practical than chasing sports dreams." With my playing career over, I channeled my passion for sports into becoming an agent. I graduated with honors and applied for positions at top sports management firms. After dozens of rejections and temporary jobs to pay rent, I finally landed an entry-level position at a small agency in Chicago. Meanwhile, Madison had enrolled at a private college funded entirely by our parents. She changed majors 3 times in 2 years, spent more time partying than studying, and eventually dropped out. Rather than facing consequences, she moved back home, where our parents welcomed her with open arms and continued financial support. While I worked 80-hour weeks, starting at the absolute bottom of the agency, making coffee runs and organizing files, Madison lived rent-free at home, receiving a monthly allowance for doing nothing more than occasional help with household chores. When I visited during holidays, the contrast in how we were treated remained stark. Madison still had her perfect bedroom preserved like a shrine, while mine had been converted into a home office almost immediately after I left for college. Despite the challenges, I slowly built my reputation in the industry. I worked harder than anyone else, staying late, volunteering for the difficult clients, and studying contract law in my scarce free time. After 3 years, I was promoted to junior agent and allowed to sign my first clients, mostly undrafted players and athletes in minor leagues. What I lacked in prestigious connections I made up for, with dedication and genuine care for my clients' careers. I answered calls at all hours, negotiated fiercely for fair treatment, and built a reputation as someone who would fight tirelessly for even the smallest contract improvements. 5 years into my career, my break finally came. I spotted an overlooked college football player with extraordinary potential. Everyone else had written him off due to his attendance at a small school, but I saw something special. His name was Jamal Washington, and I convinced him to sign with me by promising personal attention that larger agencies couldn't provide. Jamal exceeded all expectations in his rookie year, breaking several team records and being named Rookie of the Year. Suddenly, bigger agencies were circling, trying to poach my rising star. But Jamal remained loyal, impressed by my dedication to his career. This loyalty was about to pay off in ways neither of us could have imagined. After Jamal's spectacular rookie season, it was time to negotiate his next contract. The team had initially signed him to a modest rookie deal, but his performance had made that arrangement laughably inadequate. I spent weeks preparing for the negotiations, researching comparable players, analyzing market trends, and developing a comprehensive strategy. The negotiations were brutal. I sat across from the team's general manager and their lead attorney, both veterans with decades of experience trying to undervalue players. They opened with an offer that was insultingly low, barely twice his rookie salary, despite his record-breaking performance. "We appreciate Jamal's contributions," the GM said with a practiced smile, "but we have salary cap concerns and other players to consider." I pushed back hard, presenting detailed statistics comparing Jamal to players earning 3 times what they were offering. The meetings often lasted 6 hours, with neither side willing to budge. After the third session ended in a stalemate, I received a troubling call from Jamal. Ray Alliance Sports Management reached out. "They're promising they can get me $15 million over 3 years. This was the moment every agent fears. A larger agency trying to steal your biggest client. I didn't blame Jamal for considering it. That was life-changing money. But I knew I could do better if given the chance. "Give me 48 hours, I told him. "If I can't beat that offer, I'll understand if you move on." For the next 2 days, I barely slept. I called in every favor, reached out to sports journalists about leaking Jamal's potential, and prepared a presentation highlighting his marketability beyond just his playing statistics. When I returned to the negotiation table, I was armed with not just performance data, but endorsement potential that the team hadn't considered. The breakthrough came when I convinced the team's marketing department to join our meeting. They confirmed what I had been saying. Jamal was becoming the face of the franchise, with jersey sales skyrocketing and fan engagement increasing whenever he was featured. This was value beyond the field that warranted additional compensation. On day 5 of negotiations, the general manager slid a paper across the table. $10 million 3 years, with performance incentives that could add another $2 million. Final offer. I reviewed the details carefully, looking for hidden catches or unfavorable terms. Finding none, I called Jamal from the conference room. "We did it. $10 million guaranteed, potentially 12, with incentives I know you'll hit." His excitement was palpable through the phone, and in that moment all the years of struggle seemed worth it. After signing the preliminary agreement, I sat alone in my car in the stadium parking lot, overwhelmed by emotion. This wasn't just Jamal's victory, it was mine too. Against all odds, the kid whose parents never showed up to his games had just negotiated a multi-million-dollar contract. As the reality of the achievement settled in, my thoughts unexpectedly turned to my family. Despite years of dismissal and favoritism, some part of me still craved their approval. Maybe, just maybe, this success would finally be enough to make them proud. I knew it was probably foolish, but I decided to drive to my parents' house to share the news in person. The 2-hour drive from downtown Chicago to the suburbs where I grew up gave me plenty of time to rehearse what I would say. I imagined my father finally acknowledging my accomplishments, my mother hugging me with pride, and even Madison offering sincere congratulations. Deep down, I knew these scenarios were unlikely, but hope is a persistent thing. As I turned onto our street, the familiar houses brought back a flood of memories. Riding bikes with neighborhood kids, walking to school, sneaking out to play football under streetlights after bedtime. I parked in front of my childhood home, noticing that my father had finally replaced the old maple tree that had died years ago. Sitting in my car, I rehearsed one last time what I would say. No bragging, no resentment about the past, just sharing good news with the people who should care most about my success. I took a deep breath, grabbed the bottle of champagne I had brought to celebrate, and walked to the front door. My mother answered, surprise evident on her face. "Ray, we weren't expecting you." I was in the area and thought I'd stop by. I lied, not wanting to admit I'd driven 2 hours, specifically to see them. "Is this a bad time?" No, come in. We're just about to have dinner. There's probably enough for one more." The probably stung, but I smiled and stepped inside. The house looked largely the same except for new photos on the wall, mostly of Madison at various events, with only one older picture of me in my college football uniform, partially hidden behind a newer frame. My father was setting the table while Madison lounged on the couch scrolling through her phone. He gave me a quick nod of acknowledgement. "Look who decided to visit my mother," announced. Madison barely looked up. "Hey." "Perfect timing," my father said, though his tone suggested the opposite. "Your mother made pot roast." As we sat down to dinner, I placed the champagne bottle on the table. "I actually have some news I wanted to share with you all." The dining room fell silent, as my family turned their attention to the champagne bottle I had placed on the table. My mother raised an eyebrow, while my father looked at it with suspicion rather than curiosity. "I just closed the biggest deal of my career," I began, unable to contain a proud smile. "A $10 million contract for my client Jamal Washington. 3 years fully guaranteed with performance incentives that could push it to $12 million. I waited for the reaction I had rehearsed in my car. Congratulations, pride, maybe even an admission that my career choice wasn't the waste of potential they had always claimed it was. Instead, I was met with underwhelming responses. "That's for your client, not you," my father pointed out immediately. "What's your cut?" Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. "Speaking of good news, did Madison tell you she's starting her own social media consulting business? She already has 3 potential clients interested." Madison smirked from across the table. "Yeah. Turns out all those years of building my Instagram following were actually career development." Just like that, my moment was redirected to Madison's latest venture, which, from previous experience, would likely be abandoned within months, like her pottery business clothing line and brief stint as a fitness instructor. "That's great, Madison," I said sincerely, because despite everything, I had never wanted to be the kind of brother who couldn't celebrate his sister's endeavors. "And Dad, to answer your question, the standard agency fee is 3%. But that's not really the point. It's about the milestone and what it means for my career going forward." 3%. My father calculated quickly. 300,000 over 3 years. That's only 100,000 a year before taxes. The way you presented it, I thought you had made the 10 million. The dismissal of my achievement felt like a physical blow. 100,000 a year is 6 times what my starting salary was at the agency. It's a big deal in my industry to negotiate a contract like this so early in my career. "I'm sure it is, honey," my mother said, in that placating tone she had perfected over the years. Now Madison was just telling us about her meeting with a local boutique owner who might hire her to manage their online presence. For the next 20 minutes, I sat quietly eating my pot roast while my parents fawned over Madison's business plans. She had no training, no experience, and no clients actually signed. Yet they treated her vague intentions as more impressive than my tangible achievement. Finally, when there was a lull in the conversation, I tried once more. I brought the champagne to celebrate. I thought we could toast to everyone's successes. "Oh, we don't keep alcohol in the house anymore," my mother replied. "Your father is trying to reduce his triglycerides." Besides, Madison added, with a sharp edge to her voice, "some of us have worked for our opportunities without riding on the coattails of other people's athletic abilities." That was the breaking point. Years of restraint and understanding crumbled in an instant. Worked for your opportunities. I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. When have you ever worked for anything, Madison? You dropped out of the college they paid for, you've lived rent-free in their house for years, and you've never held a job for more than 3 months. Meanwhile, I put myself through the last year of college, after my scholarship ended, with my injury built a career from nothing, and have supported myself entirely since graduation. The table fell silent. Madison's face flushed red, while my parents looked shocked that I had finally spoken the truth we all knew, but never acknowledged. How dare you speak to your sister that way? My father said, his voice rising. She's been finding her path, which takes time. And what about my path? When I found football, you barely showed up to games. When I got injured, you acted like I'd failed personally. When I became an agent, you treated it like a consolation prize for not making it as a player. I have never not once received the kind of support and encouragement you've given Madison her entire life. My mother's eyes welled with tears, not for the pain she had caused me, but from the perceived attack on her parenting. That's not true, Ray. We've always supported you. Name one time I challenged. One single time you put my needs or accomplishments first. The silence that followed was answer enough. I didn't come here to fight, I said, standing up from the table. I came to share something important with my family, hoping that just once you might be happy for me. That was clearly a mistake. I grabbed my jacket and the untouched champagne bottle. My father remained seated, jaw clenched in anger, while my mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Madison, however, followed me into the hallway toward the front door. You've always been jealous of me, she hissed, quiet enough that our parents couldn't hear from the dining room, just because Mom and Dad love me more. I turned to face her, keeping my voice level. I'm not jealous, Madison. I'm disappointed. In them for their favoritism, and in you for never recognizing your privilege or doing anything meaningful with it. Her face contorted with rage. You think you're so much better than me with your fancy job and successful client. You know what? You've always been a self-righteous jerk. I shook my head and turned toward the door, eager to escape the toxicity I had foolishly walked into. As I reached the top of the staircase that led down to the front entryway, I heard rapid footsteps behind me. Don't you walk away from me, Madison shouted. I felt a violent shove against my back, so hard and unexpected that I lost my balance immediately. The champagne bottle flew from my hand as I desperately reached for the railing, my fingers grazing it but failing to get a grip. Time seemed to slow as I realized what was happening. The first impact was my shoulder against the edge of a step, sending shocking pain through my upper body. Then my head struck hard and I tumbled uncontrollably. Each collision brought new pain, ribs, hip, arm, head again. The world spun in a sickening blur as I continued to fall. My last conscious thought was disbelief, that my own sister had pushed me, followed by the irony that the champagne I'd brought to celebrate would never be opened. Then everything went black as I landed in a broken heap at the bottom of the stairs. Beeping machines and the antiseptic smell of hospital disinfectant were the first things I registered as consciousness slowly returned. I tried to open my eyes, but only the right one complied. The left felt swollen shut. A wave of pain washed over me when I attempted to move, radiating from what felt like every part of my body. He's waking up, a female voice said from somewhere nearby. A face came into view. A woman in blue. Scrubs with a gentle expression. Mr. Jenkins Ray. Can you hear me? I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. The nurse quickly held a cup with a straw to my lips, and the cool water was the most welcome sensation I'd felt in what seemed like forever. What happened? I managed to croak after a few sips. You had a serious fall down a staircase, she explained. You were brought in by ambulance 3 days ago. 3 days. I had lost 3 entire days. Panic surged through me as fragmented memories returned. The dinner, the argument, Madison behind me at the top of the stairs. A doctor entered the room, clipboard in hand. Good to see you awake, Mr. Jenkins. I'm Dr. Harrison. You gave us quite a scare. He proceeded to explain my injuries. A severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, a fractured left arm, a dislocated shoulder, and extensive bruising. I had been in a coma for the first 48 hours, and they had been monitoring me closely for brain swelling. As the doctor spoke, I glanced around the private hospital room, suddenly aware of what was missing, any sign that my family had been there. No flowers, no cards, no personal items beyond my own wallet and phone on the bedside table. My family, I asked after the doctor finished his explanation. Have they been here? Dr. Harrison and the nurse exchanged a look that told me everything before they said a word. Your parents visited briefly the first day, the nurse said carefully. They haven't returned since then. The words hit harder than the fall down the stairs. My own parents had abandoned me while I was in a coma, fighting for my life. Would you like us to call them? The nurse offered, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. My phone, I requested, ignoring her question. When she handed it to me, I saw dozens of missed calls and messages, but none from my parents or Madison. Instead, they were from Jamal colleagues at the agency and friends, who had apparently been trying to reach me for days. I scrolled through the messages, learning that my absence had caused concern at work when I missed an important follow-up meeting for Jamal's contract. My boss had been calling hospitals when I failed to show up or respond to calls, eventually locating me here. With shaking hands, I dialed my parents' number. My father answered on the fourth ring. Hello. Dad, it's Ray. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, weak and raspy. A long pause followed. You're awake. No concern, no relief, just a flat statement of fact. Yes, I've been in a coma for 2 days. The nurse said you and Mom came once. Another pause. We had to get Madison settled. She's been very upset about what happened. Disbelief turned my blood cold. She pushed me down the stairs. Dad? That's not how she tells it, he replied instantly. She says you were drunk and lost your balance when she tried to stop you from driving. That champagne bottle was found broken at the bottom of the stairs. I wasn't drunk. I never even opened that bottle. I brought it to celebrate with you. Ray, you've always been jealous of the attention Madison receives. You provoked her with your accusations at dinner, and now you're trying to blame her for your clumsiness. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad, I have a concussion, broken ribs, and a fractured arm. The doctors said I could have died. Your daughter deliberately pushed me down those stairs. Your mother and I will not listen to these false accusations against your sister. Madison is traumatized enough by watching you fall. She doesn't need you making up stories to get her in trouble, because you're angry at us. Get her in trouble, I repeated incredulously. She committed assault. She could have killed me. My father's voice turned cold. Frankly, Ray, with the way you spoke to us that night, you deserved what happened. Call us when you're ready to apologize to your sister. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in shock, his last words echoing in my mind. You deserved what happened. My own father believed I deserved to be put in a coma. The nurse had been checking my vital signs during the call, and from her expression, she had heard enough to understand the situation. She gently took the phone from my trembling hand and placed it back on the table. I'm so sorry, she said quietly. Tears welled in my good eye, not just from the physical pain, but from the unbearable weight of this final betrayal. All those years of hoping for their approval, of making excuses, for their behavior, of believing that deep down they must care about me in some way. All of it crumbled in the face of this undeniable truth. They had chosen Madison over me, even when she had committed a violent crime against their own son. The nurse, whose name tag read Sarah, stayed with me longer than was probably required, offering a compassionate presence while I processed what had happened. She brought me tissues, adjusted my pillows, and spoke softly about my recovery plan, as if trying to give me something concrete to focus on beyond my family's betrayal. As the reality of my situation sank in, I realized I needed to act. My family had abandoned me, but I still had people who cared, colleagues who had been searching for me, clients who depended on me, friends who were worried. Can I make another call? I asked Sarah. She nodded, handing me back the phone. With movements made awkward by my injuries, I scrolled through my contacts and found the person I needed most at that moment. Not family by blood, but someone who had always been fair and straightforward with me. Thomas Mercer answered the deep voice of my attorney, a man who had helped me navigate contract law when I first started as an agent. Thomas, it's Ray Jenkins. I need your help. I'm in the hospital, and I need to talk to you about pressing charges against my sister for assault. Thomas arrived at the hospital less than 2 hours after my call briefcase in hand, and concern etched on his face. He'd been my attorney for business matters for 3 years, but this was the first time I'd needed his help for something personal. "My God, Ray," he said, taking in my injuries. "You look terrible." "Thanks," I replied, with a weak attempt at humor. "You should see the stairs." He pulled a chair close to my bed and got straight to business. "Tell me exactly what happened start to finish." I recounted everything. The contract celebration, the dinner with my family, the argument, and Madison deliberately pushing me down the stairs. I also told him about my conversation with my father and their decision to side with Madison despite what she had done. Thomas took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he closed his notebook and looked at me seriously. "This is assault and battery, Ray. Possibly even attempted murder, depending on how a prosecutor views the intent. We need to file a police report immediately." A knot formed in my stomach. Despite everything, there was still that ingrained hesitation about taking legal action against family. "Are you sure that's necessary?" "Listen to me." Thomas leaned forward. "Your sister committed a serious crime that could have killed you. Your parents are now effectively accessories after the fact by lying about what happened. If you don't press charges, you're sending the message that this behavior is acceptable. What happens the next time she loses her temper with someone?" He was right, of course. This wasn't just about me anymore. Madison had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and my parents were enabling dangerous behavior. "Okay," I agreed. "Let's do it." Thomas arranged for a police officer to come to the hospital that afternoon to take my statement. Detective Laura Simmons was thorough and professional, photographing my injuries and recording my account of what happened. She explained that they would investigate, interview my family, and determine whether charges would be filed. "Given the severity of your injuries and the circumstances you've described, I believe the district attorney will likely pursue this case," she informed me before leaving. The next few days were a blur of medical treatments, pain management, and beginning the long road to recovery. My ribs ached with every breath, my arm throbbed beneath its cast, and the concussion left me with persistent headaches and dizziness. But physical pain was only part of what I was dealing with. My colleagues from the agency visited, bringing actual flowers and support. My boss assured me my job was secure, and clients were being temporarily reassigned until I could return to work. Jamal came twice, visibly shaken by what had happened to me right after our contract celebration. "Man, I can't believe your own sister did this to you," he said during his second visit. "That's messed up." "Family isn't always what it should be," I replied, a truth I was finally accepting after years of making excuses. On the 5th day of my hospital stay, as I was struggling through a physical therapy session to maintain mobility in my uninjured limbs, a nurse informed me I had visitors. Assuming it was more colleagues, or perhaps Thomas, with case updates, I was unprepared for who walked through the door. My parents entered first, followed by Madison. Their expressions weren't of concern or remorse, but of barely contained anger. Madison looked almost smug. "The police came to our house," my father stated without preamble or greeting. "You actually filed charges against your sister." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, I did." "How could you do this to your own family?" my mother demanded, her voice shrill. "Madison made a mistake in the heat of the moment. And now you're trying to ruin her life over it." "A mistake," I repeated, incredulous. "Look at me, Mom. Really look at me. I could have died. That wasn't a mistake, it was assault." Madison stepped forward, arms crossed defensively. "You were drunk and belligerent. I was just trying to stop you from driving in that condition. You lost your balance and fell." "We both know that's a lie," I said calmly, looking directly at her. "And the police will figure that out too." "Your word against mine," she replied with disturbing confidence. "And Mom and Dad both saw how aggressive you were that night." My father nodded in agreement. "We've already given our statements to the police. Your accusations won't hold up." I realized then that they had come not out of concern or to make amends, but to intimidate me into dropping the charges. The family that should have been by my hospital bed, supporting my recovery, was instead trying to protect the person who put me there. "Why are you really here?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "To talk some sense into you," my father replied. "Drop these ridiculous charges. We're family, We handle our problems privately. Family. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Family doesn't push someone down a flight of stairs. Family doesn't abandon their son in the hospital. Family doesn't tell their injured child that they deserved what happened to them. My mother's expression hardened. You've always been dramatic, Ray. Always competing with Madison for attention. Well, congratulations, you've got attention now. Is that what you wanted? Their complete inability to acknowledge reality was staggering. In their warped perspective, I was the villain for seeking justice, not Madison for committing violence, or them for enabling her. I want you to leave, I said quietly. All of you. And don't come back unless you're ready to tell the truth about what happened. You'll regret this. Madison threatened her true nature, showing through the facade she maintained for our parents. Nobody takes my family from me. You did that yourself. When you pushed me down those stairs, I replied, maintaining eye contact, despite the chill her words sent through me. After they left, I called Thomas immediately and told him about their visit and thinly veiled threats. He arrived within the hour, bringing news that would change the trajectory of this entire situation. The police searched your parents' house with a warrant today, he informed me. They found something your family doesn't know about yet. Your father's home security system captured the incident on video. The camera in the front entryway recorded the entire thing, including Madison pushing you and your parents finding you at the bottom of the stairs. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, I felt a surge of something beyond pain and betrayal, a sense that justice might actually be possible. With that evidence, Thomas continued, the DA is charging Madison with aggravated assault. And given your parents' false statements to the police, they're considering obstruction of justice charges against them as well. I processed this information feeling conflicted. While I wanted Madison held accountable for what she'd done, the prospect of my parents facing criminal charges was complicated. Despite everything, they were still my parents. What about a civil case, I asked. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain, and suffering. Thomas nodded approvingly. Absolutely. The criminal case will proceed regardless of what you decide, but a civil suit would ensure you're compensated for what you've endured. And given the video evidence, it would be a very strong case. That evening alone in my hospital room, I made my decision. Madison needed to face consequences for her actions, and my parents needed to understand that their favoritism had crossed into criminal territory. I would pursue both criminal and civil cases, not out of vengeance, but because it was the only way they might finally recognize the gravity of what they had done. The following morning, I signed the paperwork Thomas prepared to initiate the civil lawsuit against Madison and my parents. As the nurse helped me back into bed afterward, she mentioned something that had never occurred to me. Your grandmother called the nurses' station yesterday while your family was here. She wanted to check on you, but asked us not to tell them she had called. She's planning to visit tomorrow. My grandmother, I asked, confused. My parents' mothers are both deceased. She said her name was Dorothy Jenkins. Your father's mother. A faint memory stirred. My paternal grandmother, who had moved to Florida when I was very young. I barely remembered her, and my father rarely mentioned her. Why would she be calling about me after all these years? Did she leave a number? I asked. When the nurse provided it, I made a call that would bring an unexpected ally into my corner during the most challenging time of my life. After 2 weeks in the hospital, I was finally discharged with a long list of follow-up appointments, medication schedules, and physical therapy sessions. The question of where I would recover became immediately pressing. My third-floor walk-up apartment was impossible with my injuries, and staying with family was obviously not an option. Thomas solved the problem by arranging a short-term rental in an accessible building with an elevator. My agency colleagues helped move essential items from my apartment, and I settled into what would be my recovery home for the next several months. My body was healing slowly, but each day brought improvement. The constant pain receded to a more manageable discomfort, and I gradually regained some independence. What wasn't healing was the emotional wound left by my family's betrayal. Despite trying to focus on recovery and the upcoming legal proceedings, I found myself awake at night replaying a lifetime of subtle and not so subtle favoritism that had culminated in this ultimate rejection. Thomas visited regularly, updating me on both the criminal and civil cases. Madison had been formally charged with aggravated assault with an arraignment scheduled for the following month. My parents had narrowly avoided obstruction charges, but were named as defendants in my civil lawsuit for their role in enabling Madison's behavior and for negligence in failing to seek proper medical attention immediately after my brannis. Fall. The security footage is damning, Thomas explained during one visit. It clearly shows Madison following you to the stairs and deliberately pushing you with significant force. There's no way to interpret it as you losing your balance, especially with the audio capturing her shouting at you moments before. Have they seen the footage, I asked? Not yet. They'll get access during discovery, but right now they still think it's your word against theirs. Their attorney has already approached me about dropping the civil suit, suggesting your family might be willing to help with some medical expenses if you also agree to request leniency in the criminal case. I shook my head firmly. That's not happening. I told them as much, Thomas assured me. Also, I've been in touch with your grandmother Dorothy. She's quite a remarkable woman. My meeting with grandmother Dorothy had been nothing short of revelatory. At 82, she was sharp, direct, and surprisingly well-informed about my situation, despite having been estranged from my father for over a decade. She had flown in from Florida and visited me at the hospital the day before my discharge. Within minutes of her arrival, I understood why my father rarely spoke of her. Dorothy Jenkins was a woman who valued truth and accountability above all else, including family loyalty, when that loyalty demanded complicity in wrongdoing. Your father was always weak, she had told me bluntly. He let your mother control everything, including how they treated you children. I tried to intervene when you were young, when I saw how they favored Madison, but they cut me off, said I was interfering with their parenting. Dorothy explained that she had maintained distant tabs on the family through mutual acquaintances, occasionally receiving updates about major events. She had known about my football scholarship, my injury, and had even tried to reach out when I graduated college, only to have my father rebuff her attempts. When I heard about what happened to you, about what Madison did, and how they're defending her, I knew I had to come. Some lines can't be crossed, not even for family. Especially not for family. Her support became invaluable in the weeks that followed. While Thomas handled the legal aspects, Dorothy provided something I had never truly experienced: unconditional family support. She temporarily relocated to Chicago to help with my recovery, finding a short-term rental near mine. As the preliminary hearing approached, Thomas worked tirelessly, gathering evidence beyond the security footage. He interviewed neighbors who had witnessed the aftermath of my fall, obtained medical records documenting the severity of my injuries, and compiled a history of Madison's previous volatile behavior that my parents had systematically excused or covered up. One particularly significant breakthrough came when Thomas located our family's former housekeeper Maria Gonzalez, who had worked for my parents for over a decade during my childhood. Maria provided a sworn statement describing numerous incidents of Madison's aggressive behavior toward me that my parents had dismissed or blamed on me. She once pushed him off the backyard playset when he was 10, Maria's statement read. He broke his wrist, but Mrs. Jenkins told everyone at the hospital he had fallen while playing too roughly. They bought Madison a new doll that same day to help her feel better about the accident. This pattern of enabling behavior strengthened both the criminal case against Madison and the civil case against my parents. The prosecutor assigned to Madison's case became increasingly confident about securing a conviction. A week before the preliminary hearing, I received an unexpected call from a blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Ray, it's Dad." My hand tightened around the phone. "What do you want?" "This has gone far enough," he said, his voice a mixture of anger and something that might have been fear. "Your mother and I have spoken with Madison's attorney. They're offering a deal. She'll plead to a misdemeanor, get probation, and we'll cover your medical expenses. In exchange, you drop the civil suit against us." "No," I replied without hesitation. "Don't be stubborn, Ray. This is the best outcome for everyone. No one wants a family's dirty laundry aired in court." "That's where you're wrong, Dad. The truth needs to come out. Madison needs real consequences, not another excuse, and you and Mom need to face what you've done by enabling her behavior all these years." "We've spoken to Dorothy," he said, changing tactics. "Your grandmother has no right interfering in family matters she knows nothing about." She knows plenty, I countered. And unlike you, she actually visited me in the hospital and has been helping with my recovery. A long silence followed before my father spoke again, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. If you go through with this, you're no longer our son. We will cut you off completely. The threat might have devastated me once, but now it only confirmed I was making the right decision. You already did that when you abandoned me in the hospital, Dad. I'm just making it official through the courts. After ending the call, I immediately contacted Thomas to report the attempted coercion. He added it to the growing file of evidence demonstrating my parents' pattern of protecting Madison at all costs, even when those costs included their relationship with their son. The day before the preliminary hearing, Grandmother Dorothy and I had dinner together at my temporary apartment. Despite the seriousness of what lay ahead, there was a sense of calm certainty between us. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" she asked, as we finished our meal. "As ready as I can be," I replied. "Thomas has prepared me for what to expect, but it's still going to be difficult seeing them." Dorothy reached across the table and took my hand, the one not still in a cast. "Remember something, Ray. Tomorrow isn't just about punishment. It's about truth. That family has been living in a distorted reality for too long, with your father and mother twisting everything to maintain their image of perfect parents to a perfect daughter while scapegoating you for any problems." "I know," I nodded, understanding the deeper purpose behind the legal proceedings. "It's about breaking a cycle that should have been addressed decades ago." "Exactly," she squeezed my hand. "And whatever happens in that courtroom, you've already won by standing up for yourself. That's something no verdict can take away from you." As I tried to sleep that night, my mind kept returning to the security footage Thomas had shown me, the irrefutable evidence of Madison's assault. In those few seconds of video, years of family dysfunction had culminated in an act of violence that could no longer be explained away or dismissed. Tomorrow my family would see that footage for the first time, and with it, the unvarnished truth of what they had become. The courthouse was imposing all marble and solemn authority. I arrived early with Thomas and Grandmother Dorothy, my stomach in knots, despite months of preparation for this moment. My injuries had healed enough that I no longer needed the arm cast, though I still walked with a slight limp from lingering pain in my hip. "Remember, let me do the talking unless you're directly addressed by the judge," Thomas reminded me as we entered the building. "The security footage speaks for itself. You just need to be present and composed." We were directed to Courtroom C, a moderately sized space already filling with the day's cases. Thomas guided us to seats near the front, positioning himself between me and where the defense would sit. Dorothy took my other side, her presence steady and reassuring. 20 minutes later, a side door opened and they entered. My father, mother, and Madison, accompanied by their attorney. Madison was dressed conservatively in a navy suit, her usual confident demeanor somewhat subdued for the occasion. My parents looked tense, their faces drawn with worry that seemed focused entirely on Madison rather than the son they had nearly lost. They sat on the opposite side of the aisle, close enough that I could have reached out and touched them, yet separated by an emotional gulf that had become unbridgeable. My father glanced in my direction, once his expression hardening when he noticed Dorothy beside me. My mother kept her eyes firmly forward while Madison stared at the floor. Their attorney, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, leaned over to whisper something to them. All three nodded in unison, a family united, just not with me. The bailiff called for all to rise as Judge Michaels entered the courtroom. After the preliminaries, our case was called. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Kevin Reynolds, presented the charges against Madison, aggravated assault, with the potential for additional charges depending on evidence presented. Your Honor, the state has compelling evidence that the defendant, Madison Jenkins, deliberately and with malice pushed her brother down a flight of stairs, resulting in severe injuries, including broken bones, a concussion, and a multi-day coma. This was not an accident or a momentary lapse in judgment, but a violent act against a family member. Madison's attorney countered with the narrative they had been pushing since the beginning, that I had been intoxicated and belligerent, that Madison had merely tried to prevent me from driving in that condition, and that my fall was an unfortunate accident exacerbated by my alleged impaired state. Judge Michaels listened to both sides before addressing the court. I understand there is video evidence of the incident. Yes, Your Honor, ADA Reynolds confirmed. Captured by the Jenkins family's own security system. A murmur went through the courtroom as a screen was set up. I watched my parents closely, noting their confusion. They clearly hadn't been informed that their home security footage had been obtained and would be shown today. The video began playing, showing the entryway and bottom of the staircase. The timestamp indicated it was evening, matching the time of the incident. Audio captured the argument in the hallway, every word crisp and clear. You've always been jealous of me, Madison's voice accused. I'm not jealous, Madison. I'm disappointed. In them, for their favoritism, and in you, for never recognizing your privilege or doing anything meaningful with it. You think you're so much better than me with your fancy job and successful client. You know what? You've always been a self-righteous jerk. Then came the visual. Me at the top of the stairs turning to leave, and Madison clearly undeniably pushing me with both hands against my back with significant force. The camera captured my desperate attempt to grab the railing, the champagne bottle flying from my hand, and my body tumbling violently down the stairs. Most damning of all was Madison's expression immediately after, not shock or horror but a cold satisfaction that lasted several seconds before she schooled her features and called for our parents. The video continued, showing my unconscious form at the bottom of the stairs, blood pooling around my head. My parents appeared, and rather than immediately calling for an ambulance, they engaged in a hurried, whispered conversation with Madison. My mother knelt beside me checking for a pulse, while my father pulled out his phone. But the timestamp showed nearly 4 minutes had passed since my fall before he made the call. As the video ended, the courtroom was silent. I glanced at my family. My father sat rigid, face pale with shock. My mother had a hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. And Madison looked trapped, her carefully constructed narrative demolished in less than 2 minutes of unambiguous footage. Their attorney requested a brief recess, which the judge granted. During those 15 minutes, I watched from across the room as a heated discussion took place between my family and their lawyer. Madison appeared to be arguing vehemently, while my parents looked increasingly distressed. When court resumed, Madison's attorney approached the prosecutor, and they engaged in a whispered conversation before both addressed the judge. Your Honor, in light of the evidence presented, the defense would like to request a continuance to discuss potential plea arrangements with the district attorney's office. Judge Michaels agreed, setting a new court date for 2 weeks later. As we prepared to leave, I noticed my father staring at me, his expression unreadable. For the first time, he seemed to be seeing me, really seeing me, and whatever he saw appeared to shake him profoundly. Outside the courtroom, Thomas was discussing next steps when a commotion drew our attention. My father had collapsed in the hallway, clutching his chest. My mother was frantically calling his name while Madison stood frozen in shock. Despite everything, I found myself moving toward them, medical training from my football days kicking in. I knelt beside my father, loosening his tie and checking his pulse while someone called for medical assistance. Ray, he gasped, gripping my arm with surprising strength. I'm sorry. We saw. We didn't know. Don't talk now. I instructed, maintaining pressure on his wrist to monitor his racing pulse. Help is coming. The next hour was a blur of paramedics' questions and watching my father being wheeled away on a gurney. My mother followed in the ambulance, leaving Madison standing alone in the courthouse corridor, looking lost for perhaps the first time in her life. Our eyes met briefly across the polished floor. There was no forgiveness in my gaze, no absolution for years of cruelty culminating in violence. She turned away first, hurrying after our parents without a word. 2 days later, Thomas called with news. Madison had agreed to plead guilty to aggravated assault in exchange for a reduced sentence. 2 years likely to be served as 1 year in prison, followed by probation. More surprisingly, my parents had reached out through their attorney to discuss settling the civil suit. They're offering full coverage of all medical expenses, compensation for lost wages, and a significant additional sum for pain and suffering, Thomas explained. They're also willing to sign a formal acknowledgement of their negligence and enablement. Why the sudden change, I asked, though I suspected the answer. The video evidence left them no choice. But also, your father's health scare seems to have been a wake-up call. It was a mild heart attack, apparently brought on by stress. He's stable now, but the experience, combined with seeing the truth of what happened to you, seems to have broken through their denial. I considered the offer carefully. I'm not interested in punishing them financially, Thomas. I just wanted accountability. This offer includes that accountability in writing. And the funds could help you start fresh somewhere new, if that's what you want. A week later, I sat across from my parents in Thomas's office. Madison was not present, having been advised by her attorney to avoid contact with me before sentencing. My father looked aged, the heart attack having left visible marks on his once robust appearance. My mother seemed smaller somehow, her usual confidence diminished. "We've signed the settlement agreement," my father said, sliding the document across the table. "And we've prepared this as well." He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter acknowledging years of favoritism, the damage it had caused, and their failure as parents to protect both their children, Madison from her worst impulses, and me from her and from their own negligence. "We don't expect forgiveness," my mother said quietly, "but we needed you to know that we finally see the truth. What we did, what we allowed to happen. There's no excuse." I accepted their acknowledgement with a nod, but offered no absolution. Some breaches cannot be repaired with words alone, and some relationships are healthier when ended, rather than forced into a semblance of reconciliation. Madison was sentenced the following month. I attended the hearing but made no victim impact statement. The facts spoke for themselves, and nothing I could say would change what had happened or who she had become with our parents enabling. In the year that followed, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. The settlement provided financial security, while I focused on healing both physically and emotionally. Grandmother Dorothy became a regular presence in my life, filling a familial role I had never truly experienced before. My career flourished as I returned to work, my reputation enhanced rather than damaged by my resilience in the face of personal tragedy. Jamal's contract proved to be just the first of many successful negotiations, and I eventually opened my own sports management agency, specializing in athletes from disadvantaged backgrounds who needed an agent who understood what it meant to fight for recognition and respect. I received occasional updates about my family through Dorothy. Madison served her time, and upon release, moved to another state to start over. My parents sold the family home, downsizing to a condominium, and according to Dorothy, attending therapy to address their dysfunctional parenting patterns. They reached out several times, sending cards on my birthday and holidays, but I maintained my distance, responding with polite but brief acknowledgments. Some people believe that family bonds are unbreakable, that blood ties demand forgiveness regardless of the offense. I learned a different truth. Family is defined by actions, not genetics. The people who stand beside you when you're broken, who support your healing without conditions, who value your well-being above their own comfort. Those are your true family, whether they share your DNA or not. Today, 3 years after that fateful fall, I'm surrounded by a chosen family of friends, colleagues, and mentors who have shown me what genuine support feels like. The scars remain both physical and emotional, but they no longer define me. Instead, they remind me of my capacity to survive, to stand up for myself, and to build a life of integrity, despite the examples set by those who should have taught me better. If my story resonates with you, remember this: you never have to accept mistreatment, even from family. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is set boundaries, seek justice, and walk away from those who harm you, no matter who they are. Your worth is not determined by their recognition, and your future is not limited by their failures. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to distance yourself from toxic family members? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story helped you feel less alone in your own family struggles, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need to hear that it's okay to choose your own well-being. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength and healing on yours.